Good morning and good day, everyone. We are about to start a fantastic panel session on interdisciplinarity, co-teaching, and information literacy. And I'm happy to present our panelists, Elena Berg from American University of Paris. She's an associate professor, effective August, in Department of Computer Science, Math, and Environmental Science. Linda Martz, good. Also from AUP, who works with first-year experience programs. We have then Michael Stöpel, again from AUP, user service librarian. And we have Antonio Lopez from John Cabot University in Rome, who is assistant professor and chair of communications and media studies. At the panel today, Elena will introduce theories and literature related to co-teaching strategies and challenges in faculty collaborations. Linda will continue with a co-teaching and interdisciplinarity experience she and Elena had on the first year level. And then we will move to faculty library collaborations, where Michael will talk about library's perspective on it with the success story he had. And Antonio will focus on faculty perspective in collaborating with library and librarians. Just as a note, before you welcome these awesome panelists, please keep your comments and questions for after all panelists have presented. And now, join me in welcoming our panelists.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Yes? Good. I'm not used to using a microphone, so wave at me if I'm sounding silly. So what I wanted to do, my name is Elena Berg. I am a scientist. I'm an evolutionary biologist. I study birds, monkeys. I'm currently working with beetles in a laboratory where I work with students as well, so all kinds of research possibilities. And mostly my role at AUP is to teach general education science. And so I'm always looking at innovative ways to kind of do that and draw students in. And I am going to tell you a little bit about, just briefly, this is maybe stuff that many of you already know a lot about and have a lot of experience with, but it's a little bit of research I've done on some different modes or different kind of possible ways of collaborating in the classroom. And this can extend between professors, among faculty, and librarians, kind of goes across different levels. And this is work that I've done as part of the Teaching and Learning Center that AUP recently started, and I'm a faculty fellow there. So this was me sort of digging into the literature and seeing what. Let me see if I've gotten this. So what is team teaching and why should we care about it, and why is it something that I think everybody should be doing? It's essentially, there's about 1 million definitions of it. One thing I realized when I started digging into the literature is that there's no one way to really define it. Everybody defines it in their own way. There's also not a very cohesive analysis of all that information. I'm a scientist. I always want people to analyze data quantitatively, and so I got a little frustrated trying to figure out what the consensus is on teaching together and its usefulness. But it's essentially a group of instructors together in the classroom, and there's many forms this can take. So there are actually, one reason why I wanted to have slides is just to give you a few of the different kinds of co-teaching methods that I read about, namely interactive co-teaching, which is the most time-intensive, the most difficult to do, but also the most rewarding for both the instructors and for the students. That's essentially when 2 or more instructors are together in the classroom all the time. So they do the prep together, they're working together, they are planning each exercise together, they essentially have all the time on top of their normal planning to meet together and work things out. So what I learned in all of this is, although this is extraordinarily valuable for lots of reasons, it provides a model of learning for students. They see that the instructors in the classroom may actually disagree with each other, and that is okay. So a large part of it is for students to actually see this modeling of learning and of instruction. They see faculty getting excited about what they're doing and interacting together. And in general, across the literature, universally acclaimed as the best method. But what it means is that it's a lot more time than just preparing a class by yourself, because and there's personality, conflicts, potentially all sorts of things. But by far the most kind of useful method. Then we have another model, which some call participant observer team teaching, where you have all of the instructors collaborating to create a course, but only one going at a time. So everybody's in the classroom, and that can kind of promote discussion, but really you switch off who's kind of in charge that day. And this mirrors a model that actually Linda and Martz and I were involved in last spring, which is kind of what got me interested in this topic in general. It's just how exciting it was to be part of a group of faculty where, there were 4 of us, co-teaching a course, where we were taking turns giving lectures, and then we had our own separate satellite courses coming off. But it was exciting to kind of be sharing that classroom space together. There's a rotational format where really only one is in the classroom at a time. Someone comes in, they do their thing, the next session it's some other instructor, right? Again, this is sort of in order of most effective but most time consuming to sort of most time efficient but maybe the least effective for students. And then you have a dispersed model where instructors teach linked courses and might have sort of an opportunity to interact together as a group in some context. So this mirrors the First Bridge, first year experience program at the American University of Paris. Again, Linda will talk a little bit more about that. The advantage there is that, again, instructors don't have to coordinate so much the material, but the students have some interaction between those. And then finally, kind of the loosest model is a kind of team coordination idea where, okay, maybe you're thinking about how the curriculum goes together, but you're not necessarily putting a lot of effort into linking each theme in the course, having it be formally linked together. So basically found these they name different things in the literature, but broad different kinds of co-teaching. So again, I've already mentioned a little bit, but there's this huge benefit of team teaching kind of across the board. So not everyone knows how to define it, but everybody agrees that it's a great thing to do. And so one question I had as sort of this faculty fellow at the Teaching and Learning Center is, well, why aren't we doing more of it? And how can we do more of it? Maybe even outside of just the way we normally do it, which is in our first year program where we do these shared projects that Linda talked about. Because it's wonderful for students. Again, they see the excitement of learning from the faculty engaging in that. They kind of start to see this process of discussing ideas and arguing about ideas. For faculty, it reinvigorates teaching. It certainly did for me. I end up feeling kind of isolated. I teach general education science to students who may not really want to be in that classroom initially. They don't want to be forced to take science. But in a liberal arts institution, we've decided that it's important that students can think about scientific level thinking as well. So how do you then engage students and get them excited? Well, maybe co-teaching that. You can also do more creative assignments. And it's a win for the university as well in terms of when you have happy faculty and happy students, you end up having better recruitment, better retention, and happy faculty. So it's win-win, but again, there are costs. The reason why I don't see it that much at our institution, I think why it's not that common across many institutions, is that it's a lot more work, and it can be confusing for students. So one thing that we recognized in our course that we co-taught is that we saw the connections between disciplines very easily, and we assumed our students were on board with us, and sometimes we were leaving them way behind, and we didn't know. So sometimes you have to work harder to make sure the students are with you. It can also be, some students get anxious about, well, who's in charge? And for faculty, again, that coordination takes time and effort. And for the university, they can't expect faculty to do that without compensating faculty for that work. So that's sort of the big question, is how do you pay for this? So I think you have to speak to the long-term benefits and get universities to really appreciate it. So I think I've rattled on for long enough on the intro, and I'll pass it off to Linda, but I hope we can kind of discuss some of these models a little more in the discussion.
So, am I close enough? So, my name's Linda Martz, and I'm a freshman whisperer. I intervene only with first-year students. In our first-year experience programs, I am responsible for a particular element in that first-year experience program, which is designed for students who we feel are a great fit for our institution, but who need a little bit more work on their English. So we have a little extra class time that we have built into the model so that we can help them through. It's not they're not language classes. They are regular university courses. The people moving back and forth through the different parts of our first-year experience program use the same material. They just do it a little more slowly. We have more time to explain how you work through very complicated material. I come to this with a background. I did work in applied linguistics at UCLA. I couldn't stand being in the United States and came to France, where I did all of my graduate work in a very interdisciplinary context, what the French refer to as a civilisationiste. So my brain is not wired as a discipline. It's wired in making connections through lots of different kinds of approaches. And that's, I think, what makes our particular project very interesting to me. I came into AUP working primarily in a traditional ESL classroom as I finished my doctorate in France. And then that sort of morphed into other things as our institution morphed into other things. And the recognition that our learners weren't Americans and then other, but that we had this very, very wide range of international students with competencies, with backgrounds, and that the lines between ESL and everybody else didn't make a lot of sense in the way we were drawing them. And so as we've worked through that in the 20-odd years that I've been connected, it's become a much more interesting project. And so about 20 years ago, the institution decided it needed a better way of welcoming our first-year students, because Paris is a wonderful, exciting, dynamic, difficult place to live. And we are a very urban campus. At the time, we had no collective housing. We sort of sent students out to find housing how best they could. There were very few places where students could meet in groups collectively. Our buildings are scattered all throughout the 7th arrondissement, so we're between the Eiffel Tower and the Invalides. Trying to keep those first-year students from getting lost was one of our biggest challenges, because just physically and mentally getting lost, transitioning from all the different places that they came from to an American institution, something I'm familiar with. And so the decision was to try and see what we could do differently. We'd tried some other things where we had they were just first-year experience units that didn't work. And the woman who's currently the president of AUP, Celeste Yank, at the time was in the Department of English and Comparative, spearheaded this move to develop a program based on learning communities. And this was coming out of the work by Barbara Lee Smith in Evergreen College in the 80s, where Evergreen signed its thing program. Some of you are familiar with that. And so that was very much in our thinking when we moved into this. And very early on, we recognized that we needed to build into the matrix of what we were doing an information literacy skills component. And we had this very, very long list of things we wanted this new first year, this monstrously heavy, almost bloated list of things that we wanted faculty to accomplish. And interestingly enough, as that list has been kind of pared down and modified, the information literacy component has never gone away. And we've been working, it's part of what gave rise, I think, some of you know Toby Stone, may remember Toby Stone. Toby was on that committee with me and with Celeste when we created the matrix for that, to build, how do we build this stuff together? And it meant a lot of learning for everybody, because the faculty had to learn how to work with the librarians. The librarians had to learn how to work with the faculty members. We didn't even have IT people to come in and work with at the time who were willing to play the game with us. So it's really emerged and really evolved into something that's quite interesting. So for example, Michael has been my AIM librarian for my first bridges for the last couple of the ones I've done. Now the model that we have is a combination of, it's both the dispersed and the interactive, because we have two paired, the typical first year student, arrives, and they're given a choice of among a series of paired courses. The idea is that there'll be an interdisciplinary encounter that happens. They have the two paired courses, and then they have one block where faculty are in the doing what they want. Part of it is doing things like going places, going to the library. Part of it is using Paris as a classroom, getting students out past the walls of our institution, past the 7th arrondissement, where they all feel safe and comfortable, and it's into other parts of the city. But a lot of it too is that element of the interactive co-teaching model, where you have professors sharing ideas about the same. And interestingly enough, it's throughout the years we've had a certain amount of pushback from administration because it's a big footprint. It's a big footprint in we have a 4-credit course model, which means that our freshman program is half of their semester, half of their first year course. Usually in addition to that, they have a writing course and French or math or something else. So it's a very limited choice schedule. That, again, the problem that Elena mentioned of any general education course. Why do I have to do this? It's one of the few things in our wonderful dysfunctional family of professors at AUP where we've all known each other and been in each other's pockets for a very fair amount of time that everybody agrees on. Everybody is really happy teaching in that program. Everybody is really happy having the chance to work very closely with other people. And we've had deans and provosts over the years who've tried to get us to modify this, and there's always been a group of people who just came together and said, no, we don't. Which is interesting, to have that much faculty support for any kind of interactive learning programs. Energy, the time, the money is completely valuable, not just for faculty, but for students. That something very interesting happens there. So that model is the standard model. We had a provost who came in 2 years ago, who was very interesting. He got us thinking, the faculty and staff, thinking collectively as a learning community. In that it's like book club. What's our book for the year? And one of the first books that he introduced was Daniel Chambliss's book, How College Works. And so we had a number of discussions amongst faculty, librarians who wanted to participate in what that might mean, how college works, and what some of the ideas were. If you're familiar with the book, a lot of it is based around the particular institution, which is nothing like any. But some of the ideas that were thrown up were kind of. And one of the observations in that was, well, small classes don't necessarily provide the framework so you want a combination of small classes and bigger ones where students have. And so we decided to experiment with that a little bit. Overall, people aren't as convinced by it, but that was part of the particular first bridge that Elena and I worked on. That was the semester after the bombings in Paris. So we had, as you might anticipate, a significant drop-off of enrollment for a semester. And that the bridge course that I was scheduled to teach, which was bridge, one of these for students who needed a little more language support, we didn't have enough people to fill it. So I was rolled in to this program, which was pretty much already set. So my role was a little bit, we had to figure out how that worked with it. So we had Elena a biologist, we had Elizabeth Kinney, the comparative literature professor, and we had Michelle Kuo, who is a lawyer and who teaches. And that part was really interesting. We used some of these models we had individual seminars, so students had an individual long-term encounter with one faculty member, and then a lecture that rotated through. I rotated into some of that, and I was also co-teachers, teaching aid, general support for Elena's class, which is where we put this ad. And it was an absolutely fascinating experience. And we worked, it was interesting to try and figure out how to work with the through that because of the way it was structured. Oh, the topic was called What It Means to Be Human. And so we had origins of human species, we had science fiction. The literature part was really, it was a science fiction piece mostly on the nature of humanity, and then stuff on origins of human right concepts. And since my particular what I mostly do is British history, I looked at the origin, Darwin, and the social context. And from that, and that was very interesting because you had people who had very strong disciplinary identity working together to create this thing. And interestingly enough, we found that students did get a little lost because they didn't see it as well. Which gave me the idea to try to do some of that just by myself and see what happened, and to be the interdisciplinary learner. And in that particular one, which is, I've now done it twice, and with Michael both times as my librarian, going into the classroom and saying, I'm not a specialist in a lot of this. This is what I've been able to learn. This is what faculty members have recommended that we read. These are the things I want to talk about. And it's called Science, Society, and Human Origins, and it's basically history of racism. And it was fascinating, and working with trying to figure out how to basically, that had me doing was modeling being the student researcher. Because I could go in and say, okay, these are the texts that we're going to use. They've been recommended. But also, let's look at what kind of sources. How do you evaluate these sources? So I'm not a specialist in paleontology, but let's look at how you evaluate these sources. Students were then able to choose as research projects for the first part anything they wanted based on any of the topics that we were going to cover, which also put me at the student learner position, with Michael being sort of the expert. Well, how do we find this information? Really fascinating. The second part was we have access to the visual history archives through our center, the Schaefer Center for the Study of Genocide, Human Rights, and Conflict Prevention. In that context, they did work on those visual history. Again, with me. So it was a great, it was a very interesting experience, all of that, and the transition to being kind of, that's my bit. And Michael then was.
Can I stand up actually? But I actually want to see my slides actually. Everybody's awake. Actually, I'm not well known for speaking very loudly. So if anybody does not hear me, please wave, and then I will not. Livia, stop. I will not cover everything of my beautiful experience in one of our first bridges, but I want to take out one and be very concrete on that. And so it's actually kind of the librarian's perspective. And it's one example of co-teaching. Maybe, and I think Antonio might maybe talk about this difference between co-teaching and collaboration, I think. Is that true? Yeah. I call it right now co-teaching. But there's also, of course, maybe a question of definition, how you define that, and we start talking about that. So one story of a librarian. Ah, so that's not me. These are the librarian's eyes, how we actually see maybe the library intervention in the first bridge model. And like Linda, she just explained, so I was part of one of the satellites of one, so there were 3 satellites around one course. So I intervened basically in one of those little satellites, and I intervened in the following way. I have to apologize, I downloaded this from Google Slides, and actually the red box actually got somehow kind of modified. But I want to point it out by the red box when I really got in contact with the students. So and there were 4 moments during the semester. So that was like at September 30th, October 14th, November 11th, and then November 18th. And I think there's actually something cut off on the button. So in the beginning, we do kind of a pre-test, a pre-assessment. I did like a little easy generator, like a kind of tutorial to jumpstart then discussions. And then, well, we started. So we talked about why libraries, like kind of a meta discussion. And then start finding sources. So very basic. It's a first year experience program. And then actually we jumped into evaluating sources, connected to a weekly reading. And we continued to have a drop-on session on primary sources because with the faculty member we had identified that it would make sense in her class. It was about law and history, and primary sources are very important here. And then we followed up like at the end on a library workshop that was linked to of course a research assignment. And here we go. Students learned, I guess. So that's really like something for librarians, I guess. This is a pre-assessment. The answers that you see right here is the wrong answers, okay? So we had like 10 questions, and for example, they didn't know about the Dewey Decimal classification, if you wanted to know that, you see. We're gonna update that, I guess, in the future. And so then when you look at the end, actually the post-assessment, you see, for example, that there was only, instead of 11 wrong answers on the Dewey classification, we only had 2. Knowing, of course, that surveys do not really tell always about learning. It's kind of testing, but that's kind of also standards we have in libraries, pre- and post-assessment. Of course, we did also kind of classroom assessment techniques. And what I think was very good as well, we had the chance to do formative assessment in the sense that we could intervene while they did actually the research. So there was kind of a draft bibliography, and I could get back to them. So that was something I think very helpful. And so it was a success, I guess. I think it was a success because I think students learned, like we've seen. They improved their works, so that's something very important. Actually, I want to underline that it's always the student for me that it's in the center right here. So if they do not learn, basically, then for me the enterprise right here is not something of value. Maybe yes. Then there was like another aspect that we brought, like actually like maybe another discipline, like the information perspective on the topic to the classroom. There was a different dynamic. However, I was not really sure how to define that different dynamic. I heard from Elena that there is like positive feedback on that, but actually I would like to know more about that, so that would be interesting. And then actually faculty and librarians will learn from each other, so that's also something that is very of high value. I learn about the discipline. I've never heard anything about, let's say, marketing or law and history, but I see actually how the faculty, they're ticking, and they see how I tick, so that's, I think, of high value. Focusing really like on the co-teaching, I think what was very important, and I want to underline that right here, is that the faculty and the librarian, actually we were really motivated to do that, you see. If somebody is not really convinced about, for example, the first bridge model, it does not make sense to actually work together. We are also like active. That's also like kind of a mental disposition that you should have. So I remember that, for example, when I worked with Michelle, so the email flow was very easy. She replied, so that's something of, so that's very important. So we communicated well. We went for a coffee. We talked about the beginning of the semester, knowing that the faculty, they come back at the end of August from holidays. They have many things to do. And then we're going to say, hey, Michelle, let's go for coffee or for lunch, and then yeah, we're gonna see how we're gonna integrate the library sessions or my sessions into the co-teaching or the collaboration. And so, yeah, also very fantastic. We've worked already together. So the longer you work together, the better you know each other, the more natural it goes in the classroom, and that's also something I think very nice. I really like that because you really feel comfortable as well in the classroom. So that's something very important to underline. And yeah, like linked to the good communication and the coffee, there was also a kind of strategy that we had. So it was not just like calling 2 days before saying I need you, but it was really set up at the beginning. So that's also very helpful for the collaboration or co-teaching. And knowing that, well, if there's something going wrong or upside down, we are also kind of flexible. You see, if, for example, the faculty or Michelle, she would need extra hours or like extra time for teaching, then I would say, okay, I can do it next week, no problem. I think that's like my last questions actually that I ask myself then. I was thinking about, I can talk right now about all the success and the good things, you see, but maybe that's maybe that's the reflection moment, or the German moment, or I don't know, talking nationalities. But I thought about the co-teaching actually, and how to assess that actually, and I thought like one very important that came up out of my thinking was actually what did not work out well, and what I would like to change. And so for me, that was really like the last thing to ask that I see actually with Michelle, and in the specific context, to see the final paper, because actually I want to see how my co-teaching, my interventions worked out. And if I do not have that access, then actually my teaching actually is in the end not informed. And I can't actually not know. Knowing, of course, if I'm going to have then like another 15 papers to look at or works cited, it's going to take time as well. So there's going to be lots of implications and consequences in that. But I think for doing a good job, I think that would be very important for me. Thank you.
Okay. Let me preface by saying that we agreed it was my desire to be brief with my comments, because I think the greatest benefit will be actually to hear from everyone's different experiences. And in fact, going back to my original question from this morning's keynote about information ecosystems, every ecosystem is unique and different. So whatever experiences that I've had are not going to be the same as other people. So I think all of us would like to learn from your experiences. So I'm going to speak very briefly. And I want to thank Michael. I'm the token non-AUP person up here. And when he initially asked me to be on the panel to talk about co-teaching with the library, at first I was a little bit taken aback, because I realized that our best intentions are to, when we involve the library or collaborate with the library, that is co-teaching. But more often than not, what happens is that the library is seen like as a service. And the faculty have a problem, which is that they're not able to really necessarily help students navigate the kind of research projects they've assigned. So they call the library and say, please teach them how to do this. And that's the end of it. And I realized that there is a problem with power relationships between faculty and libraries, I think, that are not spoken, which is that in a traditional academic setting, faculty are assumed to have more power in the relationship, and the faculty is the one who says, please do this, do that, and it's not really a true collaboration. So I think I love this idea of you reading the papers, because that would indicate for everyone if the design of the assignment is actually working. And so, and this is partly the fault of myself as a faculty using the library, or working with, see, I said using the library, awful, sorry. I could certainly do a better job of going to the library and saying, okay, so I have assigned this big research project, and the students, you're the ones who deal with the students with all the questions. what are the questions that they're asking? Where are the instructions needing to be more clarified, fleshed out? What are we not doing? Or what can we do better in order to improve the experience of the students? Because I also heard from our librarian that the students in my class in particular complain a lot about the assignments. So I don't know if because it's so difficult or it's just a lot of work. But so I think that's an area that could be definitely improved. And I want to acknowledge Livia Piotto, who's, where are you, Livia? There, because she's the one that I have always say, help. And she and I are actually doing a true collaboration at the moment because of the AMICAL, we were able to go to Paris to work on this information literacy framework together. So we're actually incorporating information literacy modules into a freshman level writing course, which will involve the library much more. But I think there's a lot more we could do. For example, we're not necessarily coordinating with the other departments in our university. So, you know, we have English 110, which is the English course that all students have to take when they enter in. And they have to deal with research techniques and why, you know, do they really necessarily know what my department is doing? Because I'm in the Media Studies and Communications department. And we're more versed in the language of media literacy, information literacy, because we do a lot of that. So what are the roadblocks or where are the bottlenecks of true collaboration? This is the question I would like to discuss amongst ourselves. I'll just offer some of my own lessons or experiences. I think that part of it needs to come from the administration level. The administration, I think, needs to acknowledge the importance of this and to motivate the collaboration because everyone's always so overworked. So can there be some kind of way to support these collaborations outside of the normal grind of the semester because everyone, and it's very hard for all of us to innovate because we, you know, we're just trying to survive most of the time. So, but I think the administration could also send a strong signal saying, this is what we want for the university. We want people to get together, to talk, to share, and collaborate. And, you know, a case in point, the way that AMICAL is working in terms of our university is the library is very much, our library is very much involved in AMICAL. But when it comes to faculty, it's a matter of initiative. So I love AMICAL, I love hanging out with librarians. So any opportunity I could get to travel and hang out with all of you makes me happy. So it's my own personal initiative. I don't get any instruction or any kind of motivation from my administrators to say, hey, can you please go to AMICAL and share your ideas and learn something and do a workshop with our other faculty. And we don't have other faculty coming either, which is, I would like to see more of my own colleagues here. So that would be something that we could use. I think that's all I really want to say because I really want to hear from what other people have to say. I saw people nodding their heads when I mentioned the issue of power relations. So maybe that's something we could talk about.
Thank you. We open the floor now for questions, comments, reflections. Please. First row left.
So thanks for talking about power. I do anthropology, so that's kind of right in my wheelhouse. But I'm wanting to ask you how much, or ask the librarians here, how much the one-shot method of instruction actually undercuts your ability to be seen as an intellectual partner. And that's for any librarian here, too.
I guess that's a question for me. I think, of course, there's a consequence when you think about that you only have a one-shot class. And I think, yeah, it's kind of I'm speaking out loud, so it's gonna be, but I think it's really like kind of an adding to the course. And the problem also, of course, like with the one-shot is that you cannot cover a lot. So if you want to do anything strategic or anything kind of planned or anything kind of where you say you do something wise with regard to the curriculum, this is not going to happen because basically what you do is you're going to teach like 5 or 6 one-shot classes and you're always going to teach the same thing. So that's actually, so the one-shot is not a good model. Of course we take it because I think we want to expose our students actually that they start thinking about research, but it's limited, of course. So that's going to be, and of course if I would have like the chance to develop like a whole curriculum from freshman to through the discipline until the capstone, I would go for that, you see, but this is many times, I guess, or at AUP not the case so far. Does that the question?
Can I follow up on that quickly? One thing I didn't mention, which I wish I had, is the importance of this collaboration or this I don't know what you call it, collaborative teaching with librarians. So one example of this follow-through that I think could be really important is this experiment that I'm going to be doing this summer with all of the AUP librarians where for my environmental science general education course, the students have a project which is basically to identify an environmental problem in Paris and then develop, learn from various sources about the problem and then give a 10-minute talk with a partner on this at a mock conference the following week. So they'll be coming into the library multiple times working with librarians on an assignment that I've been working with the librarians to define with their help because they know better what kinds of questions students need to ask to be able to identify the sources, what sources are important, how many sources, etc. And then I've invited the librarians to come to the mock conference so that they can hear the sort of final talks of the students who've been working with them in the library. So this is one idea, anyway, of trying to take away this plopping the students down the library and saying, thank you for doing that. Now we'll move on with the, but actually to involve librarians as an ongoing collaboration as part of the learning process. So.
Is it on? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for mentioning the power relationship. Maybe it's just the relationship itself. I don't know if it's power. It's not an equal relationship because libraries provide services. So if you are not asked to do it, you don't do this service. So we are waiting to be asked to do it, or sometimes we do propose to faculty members. It's up to them. It's really, this is the problem. We are there, we have the material, and we can improve a lot if we cooperate, because it's not one way, it is 2 ways. The problem is very few faculty have time to respond to us, maybe not intentionally, but it's just a matter of time, of design of their courses. So maybe the administration, if we can really work on convincing the administration to integrate library instruction or to understand the importance of library instruction in writing classes, in the discipline classes, in the seminar, first-year seminar, this will help a lot. And I did have great results with the faculty members who wanted to cooperate. Faculty members who don't want to cooperate, I have no results at all. So.
Thank you for your ideas and sharing your experiences. Just a little reflection on when you co-teach a course versus when you do training workshops in a random way. There's a huge difference when you co-teach with a librarian, fully collaborate with a professor. It's a different experience. I felt this doing it at EUI because we used to provide a random training workshop, and it's really easy. But when you get involved and when you read about the syllabus, and when you have, like what Michael said, attend a couple of meetings, and you feel like you have a say in this course, and you need to have an impact on the course, then the experience is different. And also, one thing I would like to add is that you feel now that the input of the librarian is more oriented. There is an impact on the training you are going to provide, because it's not a normal training session, but this is a training session that you agreed with the professor, and it will have an impact on the course at certain level. A little question is, while going through this experience, because we're going to do this next fall, 2017, I felt that it is a little bit time consuming as opposed to providing normal training workshop. So if you can help with providing some ideas, do we need to create a unit within the library? Because now it requires more meetings, it requires attending. The reason I ask this question, because we have other faculty members asking the same, says I want to have a librarian to work, to co-teach with me. It's not as easy when you do it. Thank you.
So the question is really if you should actually create like a unit and for the co-teaching. It depends actually how many collaboration, how many faculty members you're going to have to. I think many times it starts like a grassroots thing, so it starts bubbling up, and I think naturally I would actually at one point then cluster things together, how they make sense, and but I think of course you're gonna have to think, if you think strategic, you're gonna have to set out some kind of goals for yourself, what you want to do, or if you want to focus on the first year or like the grad students. I know that I think in Morocco you have grad students. So yeah, so that's a bit my unit. I'm not sure if I would actually go right away. I know that at AP we don't have really like a unit, and we collect like all the data, who's teaching what, but for the moment we have not really like thought about units. So I think as you go, and then maybe, yeah.
Well, you don't have a unit, but at the same time you do have people who have a greater affinity for that kind of classroom. And it seems to, I mean, in the very, very beginning, virtually every permanent librarian was involved in coming into the classroom. And over the years, there are people who don't do that anymore. I think it's also a question of comfort, desire to be in the teacher position as opposed to more of a service position. And that's, not everybody wants to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then even the people who want to do it maybe feel more or less comfortable once they start. So it seems to me that that's a big part of it, is making sure that the people who are doing that, it's like what you were saying about, it works when the faculty want it to work, and when the faculty don't want it to work, it's a nightmare, and who cares? But if at the same time, it works when the librarian is really invested in the notion of communicating something they're really exciting about. I'm excited about how you find this stuff. It's really cool. Look at this thing I have. Look at this great tool we can use. And that generates the excitement too.
Yeah, and actually I want to add, it's really also like how you get along with the faculty. So some people might not get along with me, and some might get along with me. So that's something really to take in account. Or somebody has an expertise also like on Zotero, and I have no clue about Zotero. And then it's this kind of also like, so that's something important. Yeah.
Question, right fourth row. Just a second, please. We need it for the right fourth row. Then Jeff.
Okay, sorry. Thank you everyone for a very interesting and informative panel by My question is for Elena. Through your research, have you come across anything in the literature that suggests why an interactive collaborative model seems to be the best, while a rotational format is not as effective?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that the consensus seems to be, although again there isn't some massive analysis of all the data that I was sort of hoping to find, but the general consensus across all these articles is the reason why that works so well is this modeling of learning. So when you have multiple instructors in the classroom, again, whether that's librarians and the professors, whether it's a combination of multiple professors, whatever that combination is, what the students see is a dynamic between those, the people that they're mentors, right? The people who are in a position to share how to learn. So a lot of it is seeing the dynamic between the faculty, between the individuals in the room, so that they can start to understand how it is that people ask questions and how those questions might be really different in different fields. And again, what I mentioned earlier about having arguments without, tearing each other's heads off, right? That you can actually completely disagree and not have that be a personal issue. And I think some students have a hard time with that, with conflict. So they start to see that conflict is actually one of the most exciting parts of learning. And of course, when you have two ideas up against each other, there may be some clashing. So that's been a big part of it, is just watching how it's done. And I guess that feeds into a lot of the psychology literature on how humans learn from each other. So I guess it feeds right into how we naturally learn.
Another question, Jeff, please.
Okay. So my question is regarding the freshman orientation and maybe a response to students complaining about too much work. And I wonder how much emphasis you put into why you do what you do versus how you do what you do. And anyone can answer this. An example might be, rather than teaching citation styles, explaining why it's important to give credit for a source. That's just one example. I'm sure that you could share others. I'm interested in hearing that. And just trying to understand that if students understand why they're in the library working, how they might be more engaged.
One of the things that we're working on is actually working with admissions and working with the Dean of Students office. Because one of the things we realize is that the people who are involved in the first year experience program, they really like it, and there's a very high level of investment. And a lot of us are extremely aware of the need to work those people who are arriving into our community, into our culture, into our way of thinking about all of these things. And we do that, and like the frameworks that we were looking at just a little while ago, we've been circulating those and using them to learning outcomes and stuff, because it's important for us. But the problem is how to get that started a little bit earlier, because what the students get most of, I work very closely with the admissions office, and they get most of their information online, okay? They get most of their information from whatever's been posted. Not even, and every now and then there's an email interaction or something, but most of it's very dry, it's very distant. And so they're going and looking for something specific, they're finding it, and they think that they'll step onto campus and that's all they'll get. That'll be their thing. And particularly, more than half of our students are now coming from Bologna Accord areas. So people who have, or people with an international baccalaureate, who aren't familiar with American style education going in. And so we go in and say, oh, you want to major in business? Great. Take a science class. Take a writing class. And they're just that look. And so working with ways to, that's one of our big objectives for next year, is figuring out how to work better with admissions, so how people are actually talking about that, but also with what's on our web pages, so that we can build into the notion, you're coming here for something different. What an American style education means is different, and it's about all of these different learning dynamics, and that's okay. And so yeah, we do step that up, and with some people come into it, with more or less resistance, you know. And we usually, for the most part, are pretty good at by a certain point, everybody's kind of swimming along, and every now and then you get somebody who does a U-turn.
Okay. Right, second row. Go ahead.
Hi. This is a question for Michael. And actually, a few years ago, we had a little workshop here at AMICAL about classroom assessment techniques. And Michael, you have introduced in one of your classes, and you said you were talking about, you actually introduced the formative assessment in one of your first bridges. And I'd like you to share a little bit how you did that, you know, vis-a-vis the power relationship with, you know, with the professor. How easy was it to introduce another activity into the classroom that was not necessarily seen by students as as it probably was perceived as another thing to do? And how did you take it?
Actually, the answer was quite simple. Actually, I took it out of the classroom. I did it online. And so the pre-assessment and the post-assessment was handled before the class started and after the classes. Like this, I would not take like very important class time away, and that for me, that's the most important thing. In a way, I said to myself as well, I'm going to trust like the students. You see, if they want to learn, they're going to fill out the pre-assessment and the post-assessment, knowing, of course, I'm going to have problems afterwards with the data collection and the data analysis, because if the data is not good, then I'm not going to have the good information. However, I still can use like the pre-assessment data, of course, for to jumpstart conversations and identify like points that students do not know. So that's something. With regard to the classroom assessment techniques, I didn't more explain it in detail, but that's like the classic things, like a 1-minute paper or like the muddiest point. Very easy to check in if they've understood something, and then maybe it's tricky, but then actually react in class time or after class on those on that information that I gathered. Coming back again, like to if there's like taking extra time away from the faculty on the teaching, no, there was no conflict anyhow. So with and I think that, I'm not sure if that's true, but I think the faculty, they appreciate not to do like another 20 minutes online survey in class, because students many times they do that so much anyway, and it's not the I think this is really also like the flipped classroom. So yeah.
Back, Elizabeth.
That's for Antonio. So each institution talks to each other across the
That's very
audience.
good.
That's the support.
Anyway, I love the idea that there is a power relationship between librarian and faculty. It's true. And I want to hear from your faculty perspective, the dominant, what tools we can use to revert this position. We librarians.
Well, for example, because I know that Livia has to deal with my students on a daily basis, one thing that would be very helpful for me, and really this is something that I should have initiated. Now I'm just through this process of doing this panel, I realize it's something that would be very beneficial, is to actually find out from her, I ask for feedback about where are the students getting stuck. Can you please look over the assignment and my instructions and tell me what's creating problems, where can I improve? So it needs to come from me, me individually. Now that doesn't really solve the problem for the rest of the university. So I can bring it up in the academic council because I'm the chair of my department, and I can also discuss it with my colleagues in my department. But I think ultimately we need to have a power lunch with the department chairs and to talk about these issues and to find out how we need to also maybe do some kind of assessment to find out how are the departments using the library. So I have no idea how other departments, like I know that there's other, I have a senior capstone in my class, so that's one of the reasons why my students are in the library a lot. I know that there's other senior capstones, and I've been wanting to talk to the other professors about how do you run your class, because I'm always every semester trying different things, trying to figure out what's the best way to do these big research projects, because I know the students get very stressed out about it. So I think we have to go have a coffee across the street from the school and talk about our strategy and invite the department chairs. The most that I could do on an individual level is to work inside my department and also make proposals in the academic council, which is probably something I should do, which is where the dean is present. And the dean really needs to hear this and get involved as well.
Quickly, Mike.
Some hidden power in what we do. And I want to see the faculty perspective, what you would like us to know from us that you don't know. Because we flank the students when they work.
I would like you to feel comfortable and have permission to come to us and say, hey, professor, could you take a look at this assignment because the students are freaking out? I would love to have initiative on the part of the librarians to go to the faculty and say, can we look at your course design and maybe find a way to improve the research environment, et cetera, et cetera. So I would hope and encourage the librarians to actually feel completely comfortable to go to the faculty and say, this assignment could use a little redesign or some input, or perhaps you could try this, try that. So I would love to hear that from you guys.
Yeah, I'll second that. I think that I think a lot of the assumptions people make about those power dynamics are just from not really knowing. So there are definitely those faculty who don't know what librarians do. And so they make assumptions about what they know that, oh, I don't need somebody to tell me how to do my research or whatever. But you spend 5 minutes with a librarian and you realize, okay, this is a totally different body of information that I don't know much about. So this is a resource. And I feel like it's this two-way street where we kind of recognize that we have different specialties and we do things well in these different specialties, so we should be interacting. And likewise, I would agree that having more interaction with how we design our syllabus and our assignments would be great, because oftentimes it's true. I hear all that all the time, that students will come in. Even, you know, I heard this recently on one of my assignments that I did, with students saying, oh, this wasn't clear, but they didn't tell me. This was something that I heard sort of from the library. And I thought, okay, gosh, that would be great to know. Next time I'd make that clear. So I think that encouraging that contact would be really wonderful.
Okay, to that, oh, okay. Yes, please.
I really appreciate your both comment, because you have an open mind, and you have an open mind, and you accept, you are willing to accept that a librarian will come to you and tell you that the assignment should be modified or whatever. But majority of faculty will not accept this fact. We have tried, I'm at LAU, I'm Cinderella, to knock the doors of each faculty and ask them actually told them that we can help them. We asked them to give us a copy of their syllabus to help them with their resources, but didn't have any response, a positive response from them. What I think this should be done, because I'm sure that we have at LAU faculty like you with an open mind, and it's your role to chat among the faculty, among yourselves, that look what the library has done to me.
or what a librarian has how have they helped me? And I know that faculty get jealous from each other. It is your say, it's not the librarian's say. I'm sorry to say that.
Is not the what?
The librarians say. Because a lot of faculty do not accept, will not accept the fact that a librarian comes to them for help.
You need bigger guns. And your
You
guns,
are, the faculty
the
are
guns,
the bigger guns.
Okay, if we have this integrated component, it wasn't because faculty went and said, oh, we really need this integrated component. It's because we had a university mandated group that said, we're going to do this first year program. It was certainly talked about in Faculty Senate. It was certainly, but basically it was the institution saying, we're going to do this. And this is part of it. And maybe you just need to rope in some bigger guns, find maybe a feedback way of getting to your dean or your provost and say, how can we channel this? Go to them, because it's power.
Yeah,
Power, crushed power.
yeah, that's what I was trying to say earlier. And for some reason, the word incentive was blocked in my brain. But the administration needs to create the incentive for this. So I think that there does need to be an atmosphere, a tone that is set by the academics, whether it's the academic council or the dean. But I think that there needs to be a message strong and clear that this is what the university wants as part of its vision for the future.
This note, it's a lunchtime, so I would like to thank everyone for this discussion, and please continue it during the hour ahead.